How do faithful people confront adversity? Many of us may have heard that the book of Job is an allegory that explains why bad things happen to good people. Most of us have accepted that explanation as more favorable than the writings illustrating human sorrowing at the whim of a spiritual trial. But at a particularly challenging period in our lives, we may have turned to Job to gain some insight from his patience. We may not have been looking so much for an answer to the question, why, but trying to understand. We didn't need a theoretical explanation of the reason we were experiencing turmoil at that moment. We needed help getting through the storm of that turmoil. So we search, not for an explanation, but for how to keep going. So I wonder if creation could speak, if these words might be echoed. Does creation say at times, I am sorrowing? Help me get through this. If one reads through the entire book of Job from the vantage point of searching for answers and meaning, one can become convinced that most people who refer to the patience of Job haven't read the entire book. In it, Job goes through all the stages of grief. He argues with God and his friends. He laments and he bemoans his faith. He displays impatience, frustration, confusion, and at times hopelessness. Yet at times his walk reflects a level of patience that works noted most remarkably in the passage we focus on this week. However, that this is the beginning of the story and cannot be used to summarize his whole journey. In addition, there's much more at work in the interaction recorded here. We can imagine it wasn't easy being Job's wife. We have to imagine because we don't know much about her. We only hear her voice in this conversation with Job. She has been treated by so many nameless and faceless women have been in the Bible. Her entire life has become one recorded moment, and she has been criticized throughout historical interpretations of this text. So, do we at times treat creation as nameless and faceless, taking her for granted? But as we read this text, searching every word, we begin to understand something never heard mentioned about Job's wife. Everything that happened to Job happened to her. His children were her children. His home was her home. His servants were her servants. So do we imagine that Job's wife had a reservoir of resources apart from her husband when she doesn't even have a name that distinguishes her from him? Every loss, every defeat, every disappointment, every tragedy was shared. Yet she has been denounced for not supporting her husband in this time of grief while she was experiencing grief that was all her own. So Job's spouse reminds us that our pain needs voice. Job's wife reminds us that creation's pain needs voice. She's lost everything but Job. And now he's presenting evidence of an illness. Is it possible that she had a reasonable expectation that Job might be her next loss? She might have assumed that God was testing or punishing her and wanted to move as quickly as possible to the inevitable and final heartbreak to come. Job at this point in the story isn't ready to deal with her pain. In addition, his response to her, which might have been rebuke or gentle chiding, indicates that he isn't ready to deal with his own pain. Do we rebuke or chide when we aren't ready to deal with creation's pain? Job does express his pain, but not here, not now, not with his partner. When he does open up, he does so with his friends. Maybe that's because he did rebuke her and is embarrassed to admit that her feelings were legitimate. Maybe Job fears upsetting her faith when his faith becomes shaky. We don't know. But we do know that she was never named as a loss in Job's life. Therefore, when he is restored and made whole, so is Job's partner. Where do we express our pain when we are sorely troubled about what is happening with creation? Job's story is one of adversity and calamity, and he and his wife are companions. So it is with us and all of creation. They sorrow together, even if the narrative only closely tracks his portion of the story. His friends, who do not experience the same losses, accuse Job of wrongdoing, but she does not. She asks the question, do you still persist in your integrity? Job's wife, knowingly or unwittingly, reveals the essential question and test of the story. Integrity may be defined as keeping your word or following through on your promises. It denotes commitment to your beliefs, your values, and principles. Integrity also means holding true to your nature. In the exchange of the heavenly counsel that opens this passage, Job is commended as the model human being who still persists in his integrity. And it doesn't mean that Job was perfect or that the Holy One expected him to be. Perhaps if we understood that Job was not perfect, but a person of integrity, it would help us consider our responses to adversity with more grace. We might also understand his words to his wife were uttered out of his deeply held convictions, but could have been expressed with more compassion and understanding that she is living her own story of grief and lament. In other words, he might have done it with more kindness. We might wonder as we read the whole story of Job, as he ponders and even laments his condition, if he remembered the words of his partner, who dared to say what she needed to say, and if that remembering gave him permission to express discomforting feelings of his own. When we are challenged by words from others we hear around how we are hurting creation and how we might care for creation, do we speak out? Do we share our thoughts and concerns? Mourning a loss or dealing with any sort of adversity is a journey that we are meant to take with one another, even if we experience it with individual uniqueness. Job had a rough time, but we can't pretend that it was easy to be Job's spouse. It's not easy to persist in your integrity when the world around you stops making sense. Holding on to your values and principles that rewards bad behavior and mocks the good may seem pointless, even foolish. Sometimes lending our voice to creation may seem pointless, even foolish. Who's listening? Trusting in God when God seems to allow the calamity to strike without impediment may seem naive and attract ridicule from those around you, or even cause you to question yourself. Job's wife dares to ask the question and begins the process of questioning that helps propel them both to restoration. There is integrity in expressing the fullness of your emotions, in not pretending that everything is okay when it's not, and in releasing your pain. Thus, while she only has a few lines in the tale, her role is pivotal. Why are Mrs. Job's words included in the book of Job? It is to move Job from compliance to resistance. It is to rebirth Job's identity. She does not offer many words, but their effect is great. Mrs. Job's voice moves Job's voice. Her words make the rest of the story possible. So creation is asking us this week, lend me your voice. I think today's story gives us an avenue and a means to respond. We may not have many words, but they have the potential to rebirth, repair, creation. Job's partner is attempting to maintain her husband's integrity, even his very humanity and his normative legal world, in the face of God, who appears to be torturously violent and unjust, and she succeeds. She moves both Job and God. In the process, she becomes a quiet hero, both in the story and beyond. Job's wife serves as a model of resistance for all those whose hurting is both terrible and unacknowledged. She teaches us the lesson that compassion, generosity, caring for generations to come, and improvement are still possible, even under the worst of conditions. Job's wife, with just 2 painfully uttered sentences, joins the ranks of the wise. We may read her words spoken with a different voice today, hear those words in a new way today, and then consider her another character presenting Job with a path to deal with the adversity he faces. Or we can uplift Job's wife as a model of her own, who demonstrates the freedom to lament, to persevere, and to be restored with integrity. She lives into her own belovedness. May we hear words that express adversity, concern, lament around creation. May we hear those words in a new way and be moved to lament, persevere, and restore creation with integrity. May we lend creation our voice from and in the same way as Job's wife did, react from and with our own places of belovedness. Amen.